There comes a moment in every age when people begin to sense something shifting beneath the surface, long before the world gives it a name. And this chapter begins inside that quiet, almost eerie awareness, the feeling that something is happening right now, something subtle yet overwhelming, something you can't point to directly but you feel deeply in your bones. It doesn't start with events or headlines. It starts with atmosphere. The air feels heavier. Time feels faster. Conversations feel thinner, rushed, distracted, as if everyone is talking but no one is really saying anything. People describe it as uneasiness, burnout, pressure, restlessness, but those are only the symptoms, not the cause. The real shift is happening underneath, in the emotional field that connects all of us, like a silent vibration rising just enough for sensitive minds to detect it. You notice it when you wake up feeling anxious for no reason, when the world feels unfamiliar even though nothing has visibly changed, when crowds move with a tension that wasn't there before. You sense that people are becoming more reactive, less grounded, more divided, as if something has been quietly turned up in the background, pushing everyone toward a breaking point they don't yet see coming. And the disturbing part is that most people shrug it off as stress or coincidence, unaware that millions of others feel the same invisible pressure at the same time. This chapter symbolically explores that collective sensation, the strange knowing that something is shifting, even though the details remain hidden. It's like hearing thunder before the storm, like seeing shadows move before the light changes. You feel it in the small things, the way people speak faster, the way decisions feel rushed, the way emotions escalate instantly. It's as though humanity has stepped onto a conveyor belt, moving slightly faster each day, pulling everyone into a future they never paused long enough to examine. And yet, within this acceleration, a few individuals begin to notice the pattern. The tension is not random. The unease is not personal. The shift is not isolated. It is collective, global, deep. Something is stirring. Something is rearranging the emotional landscape of humanity. And while most people try to bury the feeling under routine, distraction, or denial, those who pay attention know this is not normal. This is not accidental. This is the beginning of something bigger, a shift that may change everything before anyone realizes what it truly means. Once you begin sensing that subtle shift rising through the atmosphere, the next thing you notice is something far more unsettling. The unmistakable return of patterns you've seen before. Patterns you hoped humanity had outgrown, but somehow keep circling back as if trapped in an invisible loop. These patterns don't return loudly, they return quietly, disguised as new issues, new movements, new debates. But if you look closely, the emotional blueprint is always the same. Suddenly, people begin reacting exactly as they reacted years ago, decades ago, generations ago, repeating behaviors their ancestors once fell into without realizing that the script hasn't changed, only the actors have. You see the same public tensions rising, the same divisions forming, the same stories being repeated with slightly different faces and slightly different language. You hear phrases that feel recycled, arguments that feel rehearsed, conflicts that feel staged by time itself. Society begins drifting back into its old patterns like a river returning to a carved-out path. And the strangest part is how natural it all appears to people who haven't noticed the cycle. They think these behaviors are fresh, spontaneous, organic, unaware that they are walking the exact same emotional pathways of eras long gone. This chapter symbolically explores that chilling déjà vu, The sense that history doesn't simply repeat, it replays in slow motion, while most people remain convinced they're experiencing it for the first time. You start noticing how certain events feel too familiar, how society's reactions feel scripted, how the emotional energy of the world feels recycled from a past never fully understood. It becomes clear that the human mind, when overwhelmed or distracted, falls back into old psychological patterns, repeating the same mistakes with modern tools and modern disguises. And yet, within this repetition, the few who pay attention feel a growing alarm, not because the patterns are returning, but because they're returning faster, tighter, and more forcefully than before. It's as if time itself is compressing, accelerating the cycle, pushing humanity toward a moment where it must either break the loop or become trapped inside it permanently. These returning patterns are not coincidences. They are warnings, echoes from the past rising in the present, trying to remind us of lessons we never learned. And when you finally recognize the repetition, a cold realization hits you. This has all happened before, but this time it's moving much faster. By the time you notice the old patterns creeping back into modern life, another layer of the shift begins to reveal itself, a quiet, almost invisible rewriting of human perception happening not in public spaces, but deep inside the mind where most people never look. This transformation doesn't arrive with announcements or warnings. It works through subtle nudges, emotional cues, and 1,000 tiny adjustments in how people think, speak, and interpret the world around them. You start to see it in how quickly people accept new normals, how easily they repeat phrases they never questioned, how instinctively they align with whatever narrative feels safest, even when it contradicts their own experiences. And if you pay attention, you can almost feel the moment when a person's natural curiosity gives way to quiet compliance, when independent thought gets replaced by a softer, pre-approved version of itself. This chapter symbolically reveals how perception shifts not through force, but through mental fatigue. People overwhelmed by noise begin welcoming simplified stories. People drained by conflict begin preferring comfortable illusions. People exhausted by uncertainty begin surrendering their own inner voice for the convenience of having someone else interpret the world for them. It's not that they stop thinking, it's that their thinking becomes guided, shaped, redirected into narrower and narrower lanes. You notice how certain ideas spread instantly, while others are dismissed without a second thought. How people argue passionately about things they never researched. How emotional reactions replace genuine understanding. This subtle rewrite happens quietly because it doesn't attack the mind, it reshapes the environment the mind depends on. It rearranges which thoughts feel safe to express, which questions feel dangerous to ask, and which truths feel too heavy to carry. And the more this subtle pressure grows, the more people drift into perceptions that don't truly belong to them. Yet, in the middle of this psychic haze, a few individuals begin to notice something strange. Their thoughts feel less like their own and more like echoes. Their opinions feel inherited rather than discovered. Their reactions feel programmed rather than chosen. That moment of realization, that shock of, wait, why do I think this, becomes the beginning of awakening. Because once someone questions the origins of their perception, the rewrite loses its power. The illusion cracks, the mind reroutes, and they begin seeing the world not as it is presented to them, but as it actually is, behind the noise and beneath the surface. There comes a moment, subtle yet impossible to ignore, when the layers of perception begin to peel back, revealing cracks in the version of reality people have spent years accepting without question. At first, these cracks appear as tiny inconsistencies, little contradictions that most minds quickly brush aside, a statement that doesn't match the facts, an event that unfolds too perfectly, a rule that changes with no explanation. But once you become aware of the silent rewiring happening inside human perception, these cracks no longer fade into the background, they shine like warning lights. Suddenly, the things you once accepted automatically begin to feel off, misaligned, artificial. Society starts saying one thing while your instincts scream something else entirely. People around you move through routines as if hypnotized, defending ideas they barely understand, clinging to narratives that shift whenever convenience demands. You feel as if you're walking through a play where half the actors don't know they're acting. This chapter symbolically captures that disorienting moment when your inner and outer worlds no longer match, when reality stops feeling stable and starts feeling constructed. You begin noticing how certain stories appear everywhere at the same time, how emotions spread faster than facts, how outrage erupts in perfect sync across millions of people who never spoke to each other. It's in these cracks that the illusion of normality begins to dissolve. You watch as society continues performing the script, even though the set pieces are collapsing behind them. You see how quickly people forget the contradictions from the week before, how easily they accept the next version of truth, how desperately they avoid acknowledging the cracks you now see everywhere. And while this realization can feel isolating, as if you're waking up in a room where everyone else is still asleep, it eventually becomes liberating, because once the cracks appear, you can no longer unsee them. You start following them, tracing them, understanding them, and the deeper you look, the more you realize that the world you thought you understood was only a surface, a polished layer designed to keep people comfortable, compliant, and unquestioning. The cracks don't represent the collapse of reality. They represent the beginning of clarity. They are the signs that the illusion is losing its grip, not because the world is falling apart, but because you are finally starting to see it as it truly is. When the cracks in reality become impossible to ignore, something profound begins to unfold inside a person, a realization that the world is quietly approaching a fork in the road, a moment where humanity must decide which direction it will follow next. This chapter represents that crossroads, the point where individuals finally understand that the patterns returning, the perception shifting, and the illusions breaking were never random events. They were warnings. Symbolic signals urging humanity to stop sleepwalking through a world shaped by repetition, distraction, and inherited beliefs. At this fork in the road, most people instinctively cling to the familiar, choosing the path of least resistance, the path where old patterns continue, illusions repair themselves, and the comfort of unconscious living feels safer than the uncertainty of awakening. This path is quiet, predictable, and crowded. But the other path, the one fewer people choose, is the path of awareness. The path where you refuse to ignore the unease, refuse to accept recycled patterns, refuse to let your mind be shaped by forces you never examined. It is a path that demands courage, clarity, and the willingness to break from the herd. It can feel lonely at first because you no longer see the world through the lens everyone else uses. You see its depth, its contradictions, its hidden layers. But it is also the path where transformation begins, where individuals stop repeating history and start rewriting it, where perception becomes self-directed instead of inherited, where awareness spreads not through force but through example, one awakened mind quietly inspiring another, creating ripples through a collective that no longer wants to live on autopilot. This chapter symbolizes the decisive moment when people realize the future isn't being shaped by external systems. It's being shaped by the internal state of the human mind. And right now, humanity is being offered a rare chance, the chance to choose consciousness over comfort, truth over illusion, and awareness over the seductive safety of not knowing. The fork in the road is here, and whether people notice it or not, choosing a path is unavoidable. One leads deeper into the cycle, the other leads out of it. And the only question left is, which one will you choose? If you want to continue this journey with us, make sure to subscribe to watch more videos.